Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut Reviews channel. This is a 2022 Mazda CX-9. The big one, the one that will take your families on those long trips comfortably and happily. But in today's video, we're going to do a full review of this car. We're going to look at some of its mechanical or technical details. We're going to look at the inside, the outside, some things that are good, and some things that are not so good. Right after this. Let's start with the technical review under the hood. This is a 2.5 liter Skyactiv G turbocharged direct injected engine. And unlike other Mazda models, that you can actually get it with a turbocharged engine or a non-turbocharged engine. In the CX-9, you can only get the turbocharged engine, and that is potentially for a good reason. This is a big SUV. You do need a little bit more powerful engine, that is the turbocharged one. There are a few things about this powertrain that are interesting and different than other Mazda models that actually use the exact same engine, which is a 2.5 liter four-cylinder turbocharged. We talked about other Mazda models using plastic in their coolant components, and I told you that one of these plastic components has a radiator cap. And perhaps that was not the best idea. Plastic and coolant never get along. But here, we still have that plastic piece right here, and the engine cover still clips on right to it, which perhaps not the best idea in the world. However, there is no radiator cap here. The radiator cap is actually right here. And there's something about this engine bay that is interesting. For lack of a better word, it's enormous. I mean, you have so much room everywhere. This car was potentially initially designed for a V6, but they don't have a V6 these days. So here is a four-cylinder in this giant swimming pool of an engine bay. Other stuff about this engine. Turbos in the back, just like all. This is the exact same engine you will find in all Mazda models today. Great engine, does have a few quirks. One of them is direct injected only, so perhaps carbon buildup could be an issue. No evidence of it being chronic, but that's the one thing that you might want to watch for. Same thing with the turbo. Good maintenance is key here to keep these cars going for years and years without major issues. Things are extremely simple. Again, air filter right here, batteries right there. I mean, you have a quite a span. I mean, this car is so big, and this is something we're going to talk about. This car is so big that to reach this battery, I mean, that's quite a stretch here to reach that battery. It's huge. The engine bay is huge. You still have your engine computer right here, nice and convenient. You have that clever VVTi system, which uses the motor for the intake. This is business as usual, just like all other Mazdas. Nothing really different here. The transmission, also business as usual. It's that super clever 6-speed transmission with a multi-clutch disc in the torque converter. Very good design, no CVT, no DCT, none of that complication. This transmission works, it's super smooth. One thing about this engine in this car, it is perhaps on the underpowered side or the loud, shouty side. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about things we perhaps not like about this CX-9. Take a look underneath the Mazda CX-9. And the first thing is the covers. There's covers all over the place. But if we look here, there's three interesting things here. This one is a little door to drain the coolant. And there's another door for the oil filter and another door for the drain plug. Pretty cool that they actually thought of the coolant this time. Because otherwise, other than this is exactly the same as a CX-5. I mean, identical, just the parts are much larger. If we look here, control arm, ball joint part of the control arm, McPherson strut with the dampener on it right here. Very, very similar. And then the knuckle is steel or metal. It is not aluminum, That's kind of an old school touch here. Pretty interesting. And then the turbo engine, of course, the turbo is all the way up there. Very accessible here because this is a lot larger than the other ones. You can kind of see it, hard to get a lock on the focus on it here, but I can see it, it's pretty close. You notice there's a lot of room. Here's the drive shaft and the transfer case that goes all the way back. Lots of braces, because this car actually, for as large as it is, it has a lot of braces and it drives very well. Something interesting about the exhaust, the hangers are very interesting blue color. I don't know why this couldn't be black. Maybe blue was on sale, but it is blue, very, very blue. Lots of covers here, big, thick covers, folks. These are not some flimsy covers or paper covers. These are proper covers you see here. And something interesting, just like the CX-5, this shield, I mean, listen to the sound this thing makes. A proper shield here. And then equally, just like the CX-5, and you're starting to notice a theme with Mazda here. This is a very cute, small rear differential. Viscous coupler right here. This is always spinning from the transfer case, which is mechanical. This is what actually makes all-wheel drive happen or not happen. Then we look here, same thing. Kind of a sloppy finish on the sealer, no leaks, but nonetheless it just doesn't look very well. It's exactly the same. It's almost like this diff was made in the exact same factory. Independent rear suspension, unlike the CX-50, which has a beam suspension. This is pretty cool to see. This car, as big as it is, it does handle pretty well for its size. I love this independent rear suspension, although this control arm is, for lack of a better word, it's massive. I mean, it's huge, this control arm. But pretty cool design. I like it. I like the electronic park and brake actuator right there. Everything is nice and simple and well executed. This car drives really well for that, from that aspect, from the suspension side. And we can tell why, because it has proper independent rear suspension. The muffler, surprisingly, is not very big, and you notice how much space there is. Muffler is not very big, dual tips, and that's your Mazda CX-9. Let's talk about the outside of the Mazda CX-9. And the first thing is, when you look at pictures or even in this video, you look at this car, looks like a typical Mazda, you know, mid-size SUV, whatnot. But I have to tell you one thing, sitting behind the wheel or living with this, it is massive. I mean, I did not realize how massive this thing is until I saw it parked next to a GX460, a truck. And this is the same size, lengthwise, which was incredible how big this thing is. And it still has a 4-cylinder. Talk about that in a bit. But the hood section is enormous. This hood is ginormous, for lack of a better word. It is huge. I mean, it reminds me of like a large sedan. It's just a big hood. Then we look in the front. There is a small problem. This front end it's very classy and good looking. The headlights are very small, very small. I mean, today's cars, they're getting bigger and bigger, more LED, more flashy. Yet these headlights are tiny for a car this big. Don't get me wrong though, they work great. They're adaptive, they turn as you make turns and whatnot. But just the front end, when you look at it initially, it looks of a small car, but then you look at the rest of it, it just doesn't give you that indication that this is a large car. The grille is not oversized and massive. For the first time, this grille actually matches the rest of the car because this is a massive SUV. The other thing is the Mazda logo. I have mentioned that they are huge because they have to do the radar sensor behind it, but in this car it actually matches. And something else that is cool, I think it's just classy looking. See, they didn't go with all kinds of LEDs and all over the place. It's actually a very classy thing. You have LEDs on the headlight, but you actually have an LED ring that runs across the grille. Looks super nice at night. It is actually a very classy look and not too much. Then moving over to the side, and this is where kind of this starts to show its age. There is no double buckle here that gives you that indication that this is wider than it is. I mean, this could be a car from the mid-2000s. There is absolutely no body lines here. There is a little bit of a protrusion here. There's a small body line that runs at the bottom. And that's it. There isn't really much going on in the design on the side. But what is going on is kind of a mind trick that this is not a big car. Folks, this thing is enormous. Once you drive it, you will realize how enormous this thing is when you sit and the hood's so far away. Behind you, there's a giant real estate. It's enormous. That's for lack of a better word. Then we move over to the back, and that's when things are business as usual. I love the back of this thing, and it's just the taillights are not all over the place. The bar that runs across is actually chrome. Looks very classy, looks very nice. I like it. But again, this has Mazda's badge crisis. That's what I'm going to call it. We have CX-9. That's fine. Signature, because this is the highest trim one. All-wheel drive. When we go on here, Sky Active G, but this one doesn't say turbo because they're all turbo. There's a lot of badges going on here, and the bottom of the bumper is black, and the sides are also black. I wish in the signature trim it would be body color, but it's not. It's just personal taste. 2 tips for the exhaust, and then another proper chrome at the bottom. It's not a real chrome, it's probably plastic coated with chrome, but it has the look of chrome, which is proper. This car does not give you an indication that it is big, but it is until you drive it. So if you're the kind of person that don't like big cars or are intimidated by big cars because how hard they are to park and all that, perhaps this is not your choice. Let's talk about the interior of the CX-9, and there is a lot to talk about here. The first thing is, this is a very, very classy looking interior. Nothing over the top, looks very actually understated. And you almost feel like you sit here, it's like, well, this just feels like a CX-5, but so is not. Because this is a signature package, so it has every single bell and whistle. The steering wheel is exactly the same as any other car, and there's something about the steering wheel that is interesting. For a car this big, this steering wheel is tiny. That's why initially you get the feeling like this is not a big car until you have to park it or actually drive it. Then you realize it is huge. It has the same gauges as every other Mazda you can buy today. Middle screen, proper gauges on the sides. I actually love it because it gives you stuff that matter, not stuff that are irrelevant fluff. One of the cool features here that other Mazda models also has, when it gives you the speed limit, it actually marks it on the speedometer, so you can see a red line. That's your speed limit. This is actually pretty cool and useful. It's very easy just for the glance of your eye. You can see where the speed limit is. You don't have to wonder where the sign of the speed limit is. But the classiness goes beyond that. See, when you look here at this fake wood, which is fine, it's such a nice color that blends in. It's not all over the place. There's actually not wood here on the dash. There's a little bit here, a little bit on the door handles. See it on that side as well. And that's about it. It's not all over the place. Now, some notable things about this interior, which is something you will realize probably 5 minutes into the drive. The seats are, while they are super comfortable and they have this very nice kind of diamond stitching. This is actually super, you used to find this in super high-end cars, and here we are in CX-9 diamond stitching. The seats are tiny. It's almost like they took the seat from a CX-30 and it'll fit, it'll be fine. The section from here to here is very, very small. Doesn't make it an uncomfortable seat, but makes it an odd one. The seat does have memory settings. You can save the seat position and whatnot. This is part of the signature package. You have heated and cooled seats. You have heated steering wheel. The HVAC controls, exactly the same as other Mazda models. Super easy to understand. Looks like HVAC controls from the 90s. Anybody can operate them, which is a good thing. And just like other Mazda models, everything you touch, super high quality feel to it, makes just the right noises. Everything here, the fit and finish is impeccable. That's something that Mazda's been doing really good at. But what they have not been doing so good at is the updates of the interior. For example, this is not a touchscreen. That's fine. You have to use the rotary knob, which works okay, as probably this is the best working rotary knob there is in the automotive industry, but it's still behind. This system is super old. This whole car gives you that old vibe. So if you're into the latest and the greatest tech and the flashiest neon lights in your face, this might not be something that will be on your radar. But if you're sensible and you want something that has old school classiness, this is it. And cannot say more old school than this proper shifter. I love this shifter. Super smooth, doesn't creak and rattle like most shifters did in this time. It just has the right feel, works really good, super easy to operate. I love it. There's something magical about this interior. It's not really when you sit in it, it's when you drive. This thing is so quiet. It's even quieter than the CX-50. It's quieter than the CX-5. This is proper Lexus quiet or Acura quiet. It just feels like a luxury car. Proper, even more than other Mazda models. It's super quiet, super nice, very, very smooth riding. Doesn't have that hop that the CX-5 has. Super smooth. I mean, if the engine manages somehow to shut itself off, this would be probably the smoothest riding SUV in this segment, period. But the problem is the engine. We'll talk about that, how that manages to ruin the drive of this car. Let's check out the back seat. I am 5'7". This is my driving position. I mean, I have mountains of space. This is super comfortable to be here. This is such a nice place. The seat is completely wrapped in leather, not just halfway and the rest is plastic. You have this double storage space in the back, which is pretty cool. All the materials here are very nice. You have some lighting here. I mean, this is properly nice. You have a sunshade for the kiddos, so the sun wouldn't hit them in the eye. Now, what you do not have here, I guess, they skipped a little bit. You don't have any of that wood trim. You have actually piano black, which the kiddos will draw their fingerprints all over it. But hey, it's still a very nice place to be and super comfortable. But something about the CX-9 that is something you won't find in other Mazda models. This has a third row seat, and a generous one at that. And this third row seat is proper. You can actually sit people here, not just children, very comfortably, plenty of space. And this is where I want to show you that this car is actually enormous. It's a lot bigger than it appears, because you can sit people in the front very comfortably, very small seat though. People in the back with the big seat, actually the back seat is bigger than the front one, and then people in the third row seat. And then most cars that has a third row seat in this segment, you basically kill the entire back storage. But here, you actually have a decent amount of storage left with the third row up. This is pretty cool. And what's more cool about that, possibly the coolest thing, even with all this giant third row seat and all that, you have all this storage space, you still have a dying breed of a vision in cars, a spare tire. It's not a full-size spare, but hey, these days we'll be happy to get any spare tire in any shape or form. And then, just like all other Mazda models, you have the Bose stereo speaker right here, which uses the cavity for the spare tire as a backing. Pretty cool. But something car Carnot style observation. Even this, look at the thickness of this insulation. I mean, you won't find stuff like this in your Highlander, Honda Pilot. This is Lexus Acura style insulation, folks. This is huge insulation. This is just a cover for the spare tire. This is pretty cool. Let's talk about some things that I was actually disappointed by in this CX-9. The first one is, and this pains me to say it because you like this in other models of Mazda, the engine. This car is screaming, I need a V6. It's just simply too big. Whichever driving condition you find yourself in, the engine is just rattles the whole car because it's labored. And yes, it does have pickup and go, and it's not like underpowered, but it's just labored. You have to push this engine to the limit to get it to go. And when you do, that quiet, comfortable ride kind of goes out the window quickly. It even buzzes and vibrates. That's how bad this is. Not the greatest thing. I wish this car had a V6. I know Mazda doesn't make a V6 these days, but this car is just lacking a V6 big time, or at least a more powerful engine that is not as labored as a four-cylinder. But unfortunately, it goes further than that. See, the thing with cars of this segment, they are not really transportation cars. You're not going to haul your couches. That's not your initial intent. These are family cars. I'm not going to say I don't like the tech because it's outdated, whatever. I don't care about that. Actually, 90% of people, believe it or not, don't care about it. It's that 10% that ruin cars for us by wanting all these gizmos. Most people just want to transport their families in comfort, safety, that's it. But I have problems with this car when it comes to that, functionality as a family car. Let's start with the first problem, the back seat, the place where family gathers and kids will be. See, people that buy a SUV with a third row, they have kids, or they have a lot of kids, or they have kids with friends. Here is the biggest problem. I'm looking at it, sitting right next to it. Every single car that has a giant center console in the middle with buttons and cup holder and opening stuff and all that is not really meant for families. It's meant for some executive sits here in the back and puts his glass of wine and whatnot and all that. So having an enormous center console here absolutely serves nothing to the family. Do you know how this is going to look like when you have my kids sit back here? This is how your long trip is going to look like. That's what the kids will do after 2 hours in the car. And then the biggest problem. This is a 6-seater car because of this ginormous center console and because the back seat only has 2 seating positions. That would be fine if we had a bench here. And some families will sacrifice the one seat for the opportunity for their kids to be able to pass from the here to the back comfortably. But let me show you what we have to do that. Let's say we stop, your 2 kids are fighting, you're on a 6-hour drive and you're in the 3rd hour and you're about to just walk away. We've all been there. We're all fathers here. Here's what you have to do. You have to stop, get out of the car, and take your kid out who's now screaming and crying, open this, push the seat, throw them in the 3rd row seat, close this, put this, move the seat back, and then we continue our trip. All that thanks to the center console, which is mostly going to be used to do this. I don't understand where Mazda headed with the center console. It absolutely makes no sense. Now, there is a version of this car that does not have that horrendous console. It has a bench seat, which is better. And this is not very good. You not only have less seats, you have the center console that robs the best feature of the captain chairs. Absolutely not a good idea. And with that in mind comes the biggest elephant in the room. This car cost $50,000. Actually, $50,130. I'm sorry, at $50,000, there are so many very, very good and competent family SUVs with a proper 3rd row that does not have these problems. That's the biggest problem with this car. And those other models do come with a V6, at least some of them. And those other models are also nice, perhaps not as quiet as this, but when you have kids, quietness kind of is not the norm. So I don't know why would anyone consider this and not look at a CX-5, a CX-50. Unless you need a third row seat, then this is it. But now you're way over budget and there's a lot of good competition. So this is the biggest downside of the CX-9. As big as it is, and as nice as it is, and as much as I truly appreciate the impeccable fit and finish, excellent quality and everything, but they kind of failed in the things that make people want to look at a three-row SUV, and that's the problem. Folks, this is an excellent SUV. Yes, the engine is loud. Yes, we have the situation with the back seats. In the lower trims, it is better. This signature model that costs $50,000 and you lose one passenger basically absolutely makes no sense for a family. If you want a very nice car, CX-50, CX-5, they're very nice. But this is not winning my heart in the family hauling department, and not in the engine department either. But where it is really winning my heart is how well the interior is put together, quality-wise and kind of material-wise, and the outside look and the sophistication of this. If you're gonna buy this to haul stuff, this is great because it looks a lot smaller than it actually is. But if you're using it for family, skip the signature trim altogether and start looking at other competitors, because you might overpay for this, and there are a few fallbacks when it comes to it being a family SUV. For example, the third row seat only has seating for 2, not 3, even though I can see this easily being able to do 3 because this thing is massive. So you can do that, but that's the honest truth, folks. So there you have it, folks. This is the CX-9. I hope this video was helpful, informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And you have yourself a wonderful day.